if you start looking at the individual pieces and looking at how they're different, that can really help you. So looking at the bill, looking at differences in color, the length, the shape. We'll talk about that quite a lot tonight. The legs, looking at the color, the length, the thickness, attachment point on the body, different plumage patterns. For some species, even eye color is going to be really helpful. And size. Size is tricky to use when looking at an individual bird, but when in comparison to other known species, size can be very helpful. And then plumage color, but you can always use that with caution because different lighting changes, optics, the perception can be quite different. Trying to get my thing to work here. So bird morphology, and just about every bird resource like ID guide, there will always be a key to bird morphology in the front or back of the book. I narrowed down to a handful of pieces that are really helpful. We'll try not to use too much jargon, but some pieces are helpful, like the flight feathers are the primaries and the secondaries combined. So the primaries are those outer feathers up to the joint, the bend in the wing, and then the secondaries are the ones that move in. Can somebody let me know if you can see my mouse?
We can see it.
Great. Okay, so I'll use
Yes.
all of these longer feathers here are the flight feathers, these ones being the secondaries, and these ones being the primaries. The tail, the rump. And then one thing we'll talk a lot about with gulls is the mantle color or the back color. This is the mantle is the kind of the back feathers. Again, the primaries, when birds are standing with their wings closed in, the thing that you might call the tail is often the longest feathers. The feathers are longer than the tail. And so just some little tips. But if you get tripped up on looking at your bird field guide on one word or another, know that your field guide has the answer to what that is. It has the definition. It might be in either the front or back covers. The range maps can be very helpful. Birds have wings, so they can end up in strange places, but in general, you know, we have birds that are here and birds that aren't here in terms of it. If you think, oh gosh, I really think this is a lesser black-backed gull, and you look at a field guide, like, oh, they are all on the East Coast. And then you're looking at 50 of that kind of bird on the beach. Well, maybe it's not that. So your range maps can be very helpful. We have residents and we have migrant birds. There are legends in the field guides that help tell you when things are here year round and when things are just here, say in the winter. On the left are Western gull. It's pretty remarkable to see a range map for Western gull when it's just a tiny little dots along our coastline. Our Western gulls, which are so pervasive here, so common, are actually very rare in the rest of the world. Then, so our Western gulls, it's just interesting information and helps us know where our Western gulls are. But then it also gives us cool information on migrants, like herring gulls aren't here except for in the winter. And where do they breed? This tells us the summer color in the top is where those birds are breeding. So a lot of the birds that we see on Beach Watch are migrants. They are not here year round. So it's cool to know where they go, and then when they come back, they're here just for part of the year. So when we're considering what birds we might see, I always consider what habitat I'm in. Am I in a sandy beach habitat, rocky shore habitat, open ocean, coastal scrub? That is always a filter I consider. And it really helps narrow down the number of species that that would be most common there. And then also behavior. If you have a bird standing on a post, drying out their wings, it's like over the water, it's like only one thing. It's a cormorant. And so even if you don't know all of these little tricks and considerations now, we will talk about them in training and they will help. Flight patterns. When I'm the birder on the Access research cruises, 90% of my birding at first glance is by flight pattern, and then I double check. Yep, with binoculars. So flight pattern can be really unique and specific and helpful for um, identification. Vocalizations and other specifics, fly catching, all of these kind of things. So binocular skills, please work with staff if you need any tips or tricks on that. One of the main things I'll mention here is when you're in the field and you keep your eye on the bird and bring your binoculars up in between you and the bird. Don't move your eye, and because then you're going to be swinging your binoculars around and take a really long time to find the thing you're looking at. And I always bring a clean, soft cloth in a plastic bag in my jacket pocket in case it gets misty. I'll still be able to use my binoculars by drying things off. Okay. So before we get into bird families, the bird families lecture, I want to talk a little bit about the handout we gave you on the first day of class that is common bird families or something like that. It's a two-page sheet. This, if you're newer to birding, please spend a lot of time with that, helping you kind of see the characteristics of the families, like the cormorants, the gulls, the loons, and then studying the birds that are most common in those groups. Know that once you are getting trained on the beach that you've been assigned, your species list for your beach that you'll be working on for most beaches, it's like 15 species are most common. Some are quite a bit more than that, but you will very quickly get quite good at the species most common. And then when something shows up that isn't, then you can say, huh, okay, I know that's not one that I know. And I'm going to take some notes on it, maybe take a picture and work on figuring out what that identification is. So you don't need to know the 200 species that could be seen. You need to know the most common. So that's what we'll focus on today is kind of some of the most common bird families and the most common species of those. We're not going to talk about all of these bird families today. We're going to be talking about a good number of them. So we'll go through these families one by one and talk about the most common species seen of those groups, just as a first pass. And there'll be a bunch of information on the slide. There'll be more information that you can find on the portal. So for each of these species, we'll talk about their typical habitat, behavior, field ID, and natural history specifics. There are some more live and dead bird resources that are annotated that we'll make available on the portal for your studying enjoyment. Okay, we are going to jump in. So loons, we saw a number of loons on Prissy Field the other day. That's a great spot to see our 3 most common species. So these are really large water birds. When you find your first dead common loon on the beach, you're going to look at it and say, I had no idea how big these things were. They are heavy, large birds. They have long bodies in the water and quite short necks. So we're going to be talking a lot about like the proportions of things, how long something is compared to how tall it is, or how long the bill is compared to how long the head is. So they are long birds with shorter necks relative to other things, and these dagger-like bills. We saw in the field that they have that laterally compressed tarsus. So that's the bone above the foot being really very, very thin if viewed from the front. But they have webbed feet, and they are pursuit divers, which means they just sit on the top of the water and then they dive and they spend quite a bit of time under the surface of the water, changing directions, chasing fish before coming up. And so some of these tricks about how they're foraging will be helpful for you in the field. So we have 5 species that can occur in California. 3 are most common. We did see the common loon, the Pacific loon, and red-throated loon. We saw all 3 of them on Saturday. Our last bird walk in Bodega Bay with Peter Pyle, we did have a yellow-billed loon, so that was a fun one, unusual for this area. So they have, if you just look generally at these, you might think they are just dark and light birds, but there are some subtle patterns that you can start looking at. So starting in the middle with the Pacific loon, they have this is winter plumage for all 3 of these species. The Pacific loon has a little, I think of it as like a little throat latch where this dark is cutting in just under the cheek. A little zig right up here, and then a fairly straight line down the neck, where the common loon has a really big zig lower down on the neck. A blockier head in the common loon, a little more petite in the Pacific loon, and then the red-throated loon is kind of lighter in general in the head and face and less of a distinct marking. So here's our common loon. 4-letter code is common, C-O-L-O, colo. And we usually have them here in non-breeding plumage, or a younger bird plumage, which looks similar to this. We rarely see them coming in or out of the breeding plumage, which is much more dramatic. So they are here in the winter, they are common. And we do have some that stay year round, and those are probably going to be the second year birds that haven't quite gotten the drive to do the full migration yet. So this is the largest of our loons. Second in size, a little bit smaller, the Pacific loon. We did see some of these. Sometimes this little throat latch, as I mentioned, is not super distinct in all postures, but here it is. Note it does not have the big zig. I'll just go back one slide, the big zig in the neck. More petite in the head, a little bit more of a rounded head than the blockier common murre. And for all of the loons, the younger birds can be a little bit scalier on the back in their hatch year. And then the red-throated loon, we saw this was our most abundant loon on Saturday, though all 3 were there. They tend to be lighter in the face, more white feeling. And when you see them up close, they can have lots of tiny, tiny little white specks on their feathers. This loon species, the common name ends in stellata, and which means stars. And so you can remember the red-throated loon having tiny, tiny, tiny white stars in the plumage, and hopefully we'll see that during training. They tend to have a slightly more up posture with the bill, so they won't sit with the head really very level. It's usually a little bit upturned like this. And this is the smaller of the loons. Sometimes people confuse them more with the grebes because of how petite and slender the bill can be. So this is a drawing from one of the resources that's in the portal done by Rich Stallcup, who used to be very, before he passed, was very involved with Beachwatch and did all of the review of all of the specimens before Peter Pyle stepped in. And even if this is a little bit of an artistic rendition, it's actually very helpful. This here, where are we? Common loon, a little blockier head, larger heavy bill. Pacific being more slender, a slender bill and rounded head. That coloration pattern with that little throat latch here in the Pacific loon, and then the lighter coloration, slightly sometimes held upright, upturned, red-throated. So loons in flight, they don't fly very often. They tend to fly in migration, and they tend to have kind of matching size head and feet, head out the front and feet out the back. There you can see the pattern at the throat for the common loon and the Pacific loon in flight, if you're looking for it. And so then also looking for the size of the head and feet out the back. Common just being a lot larger, chunkier head and feet, and red-throated being really slender. So grebes, the larger grebes can be confused for loons in that they are a bird that spends time on the water and then diving, and they have the black and white shading, sometimes called counter shading, when you have the dark above and the light below. So these birds have different proportions. So when we'll talk about the large grebes first. They are almost as tall as long compared to the loons that are much longer and not nearly as tall. They're also just a lot more slender, like almost impossibly slender in the neck and bill areas, where the loons are more stout. So I know this is a lot of information, but some of these things will stick this time and some of them will stick the next time. We'll just kind of keep talking about it. But sometimes once you hear something and see it, you can't unsee it. So I hope some of these things will be helpful. So even the larger grebes are smaller than all of the loons. And they're more slender. They also have that laterally compressed tarsus, the bone above the foot, but they have the lobe toes. So you'll remember we saw that on the beach on Saturday. And there are a number of species found in California waters. And there are 6. Red-necked grebe is not here. I should add that, but it's less common than most of these here. So Western and Clark's grebes are here in the winter. but that really means a large percentage of the year they start breeding a little bit late in the later in the year than most. They are our most common of the grebes to be found on Beach Watch. So they have a olive green bill with some highlights of yellow, but more in the shades of gray and olive. They have a they have a red eye in the dark feathers of the head. And they're overall darker in the body than Clark's grebes. So here's our Clark's grebe. And their body can be a fair bit lighter, so more contrast between the body and the head. I'll go back a slide. Or not. Come on. So less contrast between this back color and the head on the Western, and more contrast here on the Clark's grebe. And they are very closely related. They can even interbreed. This bill color is going to be most helpful for you, and that is, it is more of a yellow orange and has no olivey gray to it. The eye, during the breeding season, the eye is solidly in white on the Clark's grebe. However, in the winter, the dark plumage can come down a little bit, so the eye in the light or dark is not as helpful as we'd like it to be in the winter. So here's a Western grebe here on the right, Clark's, and then non-breeding or winter Clark's with that dark kind of creeping down a little bit. So again, we're going to focus on the bill color and then the flanks, the overall contrast between the top of the head and the back. Pie-billed grebe, we have a couple of beaches on Beach Watch that are in interior lagoons, Bolinas and Tamales. And on these beaches, we can have pie-billed grebes. You're not going to see a pie-billed grebe out on the outer coast. Also, Clark's grebes are less common out on the outer coast than Western grebes. So remember Western grebes being the most common grebe for Beach Watch, hands down. Pie-billed and Clark's grebes being a little bit more common in the estuaries. The pie-billed grebe is our smallest, and it stays brown year round. They aren't here year round, however, and but they are tiny little ones, and they do a really cool little like Loch Ness impersonation where they sink their body halfway. So just sometimes just their little tiny brown head and neck and head are staying up, and then they can just go like periscope down and sink down into the water. They also do the little dive as well, but they do some very strange and cool things. So pie-billed grebe, their code is a little bit different because we have the pie and then the build. Our code starts off with PBGR, using the first two letters of the second of the grebe. So now we have two species of smaller grebes that are a little bit tricky, but to identify from each other, but we can definitely, we'll practice it, and it really is possible to identify these two. We have the horned grebe and the eared grebe. So we rarely see them in breeding plumage here, though they can be getting dressed up or down during migration times. We typically see them like the picture on the right. And so horned grebe has a rounder head and a straighter bill, and lacks kind of a bustle on the back of the bird. So again, this is a little counter shaded bird, but has a red eye We'll go to the next slide. The eared grebe, very similar in size, but different in shape. So less light in the face. There's more dark in general on the face and the neck. A slightly upturned bill and has this little bustle off the back. Breeding plumage, again, we don't typically see it, but we can see it in transition times. I'll give you a side-by-side comparison. So the horned, rounder head with more white in the face and neck, straighter bill, a little bit longer in body, but mostly lacking kind of the bustle off the back that the eared has. So we should see both of these next to each other when we're at Bodega Bay, and will be really good to get some experience with them. That bill shape and the head shape, this kind of squared off forehead, is really helpful for eared. So you may not be able to tell the difference between these two at first, and we do have a code that is eared or horned grebe. And we also have a code that is Clark's or Western grebe. So we'll practice, we ask you to study and we ask you not to guess, and we give you codes that can help you be accurate. Yes, it is one of these two species. We're not being precise because being precise would be guessing sometimes. So if you can get it to full species, fabulous. It was an EAGR, awesome. Or I'm not quite sure, it was one of the two. I'm gonna go with, I can't remember which order it goes in, if it's basically a combined HEGR. Correct me if I'm wrong, other staff folks. Okay. So we're going to keep plotting through. Tube noses, this is my favorite family. It would be hard pressed to say favorite species, but favorite family. The tube noses, these are the real world travelers of our seabirds. They have a full range of sizes, from some of the tiniest seabirds to the largest seabirds. And they are considered true seabirds, which means they don't come back to shore after they leave their breeding colony until they are ready to breed again. So for the albatross species, they may leave their breeding colony atoll in Hawaii and not land on land again for 8 years before they come back to start thinking about breeding for the first time at 8 years old. So these birds are truly adapted to full ocean living. They have a tube structure protecting their nostril openings or nares on their bill. We'll see some pictures of that. Well, you can kind of see one right here on the top of the bill. They are long-winged and they fly with stiff wing beats and long arcing glides. They are rarely seen from shore, and there are 9 species common in California, pelagic water. So pelagic being not associated with the coast. This is offshore. So sooty shearwater, northern fulmar, and black-footed albatross being 3 of our most common. We're seeing more Laysands visiting this area as a breeding colony in Mexico is really ramping up. We're seeing more of that species in this area. So tube noses, northern fulmar, otherwise known as a nofu, they are present in the winter and they come in all different forms. We have the dark forms, we have the light forms. So a dark bird, light birds, kind of a mixture of the two. This is a species that arrives in the winter around November And we have fairly commonly had a number of large mortality events of this species. So you won't see them live, but we've had up to, I think, 150 dead on a single beach survey of this species. So this will be a common one right up there with common murres in terms of how common they are dead. They have a very specific, very musky scent. Some people say it smells like mothballs or grandma's closet. I guess that would be the same thing. It's a very, once you smell it, you know it's a tube nose smell. And we probably will, we're gonna not do too much sniffing of birds because of avian influenza, but it's notable. The black-footed albatross, this is beefowl is the code. They nest on atolls off of Hawaii, so little sandy beach islands off of Hawaii, and they range the entire North Pacific foraging for their chicks and travel all the way from Alaskan waters or Californian waters with food in their system to give nutrients back to their chicks on the island. So we are just a grocery store run for them, even while nesting in Hawaii. They're absolutely remarkable. I've worked with them quite a lot, satellite tagging them. They are super special birds and very long-lived. I don't know what the record is for black-footed albatross, but I'm sure they live longer than we know, and I think we know of living into at least into their 80s. So really special birds that we do find occasionally on our beaches. They have two little tubes on the sides of their noses, unlike the fulmar that was a single tube on the top that had both nares in it. They have two small ones and a hooked bill. So if it's an extremely long-winged dead thing on your beach and it's not a pelican, it's going to be an albatross, and it will be one of probably two species. But we have had three albatross in our area. So sooty shearwaters. Shearwaters are a medium-sized tube nose. And has anyone, please put in the chat, has anyone seen the sooty shearwater storms, like hundreds of thousands of birds flying along the coastline in the summer? Has anyone ever seen that? Somebody chime in if they have.
Yeah, oh yeah, we have.
Yeah. Awesome. I have only seen it in like epic proportions a couple of times, and I nearly drove off the road in San Francisco along Ocean Beach. I was just dumbfounded at I mean, it was hundreds of thousands of birds along the surf zone, like that close to shore. These were the birds that inspired the Birds, the Hitchcock movie, as far as I'm told. So they are one of the most remarkable, they do one of the most remarkable migrations in the world, nesting off islands off of New Zealand, then hatching from burrows on islands, traveling up across the equator, along Japan, along the Aleutian Islands, down along this entire coast, hitting all of these hot spots, foraging hot spots, fueling up at our upwelling zone here along the California coast, and then doing a diagonal cut across the equator, going back to New Zealand, all in a single year. So just hitting all of the really rich spots. So these birds are overall uniformly sooty colored, dark gray, with white white cast to the undersides of their wings. They also have that tube nose musky smell, not quite as much as the Fulmars, but very long winged for their size and very pointy winged. And the tiniest of the tube noses that we have, the ashy storm petrel. So ashy storm petrels, I believe it's 70% of the world's population of this species nests on the Farallon Islands. They're tiny, as you can see with this bird in the hand. They have a prominent tube on the nose and kind of a drooping bill. They are very small, and they do a kind of an erratic flight pattern. You are not going to see them live from shore. I know at least one of you is possibly going to be assigned to Point Reyes Beach A or 114. I think I've found them dead on that beach maybe 4 times. And I think associated with the peregrines that nest there, hunting offshore, snacking on them and bringing them back. So they're overall dark, ashy in color and have that tube nose smell, tiny little webbed feet. So pretty rare in general, live, not seen live and rarely seen dead, but a very special bird. So this is a species of special concern on the Farallon Islands due to impacts from introduced mice and other things. All right, we're going to get to some more well-known, easy to identify birds. So the pelicans, we have 2 species, and they are pretty unmistakable in terms of them being a pelican. And they're both really large birds. The American white pelican, I think, is about 30% larger than our brown pelican. They have large gular pouches, the pouch along the bottom, I will highlight it here, gular pouch, and heavy webbed feet. They are similar to that booby that we saw. Funny that our booby is going to be our standard here, but they have toady palmate, so all the toes, all 4 toes are connected by webs. So they have these, as well as the next species we'll be looking at. So American white pelican are seen on just a couple of our surveys. They are, let's see if I have more pictures. I do. Okay, we'll start with the brown pelican. So brown pelican, BRPE, is one of our most common species. You will have it on all of our beaches have them. They're here in the summer. So that means, what time of year are we? They will be arriving in a couple of months, and they will be leaving in December-ish. So they're here a good part of the year. They breed in the winter in Mexico and the Channel Islands. We can actually age them by their plumage quite easily. So the adult has a white head. The juveniles have a brown head. We can keep it as simple as that. You can extend it to, this picture doesn't show, well, this one does actually, this bottom right. The adults have a white head and a brown belly, while the juveniles have a dark head and a white belly. So you can identify, see what their age is, whether they are flying over you and you're looking at tummies, or if they're at eye level and you can see their heads. They take about 3 years to get into the full adult plumage, but they will look, you will have a good sense of their age for when you find them dead. These are aerial pursuit divers. They fly over the ocean, look down, dive, crash into the water, and they just They don't go very far down. They just go a few feet down and then pop back up. They are not going to be swimming underwater for long distances. So remember, these foraging strategies will help you narrow down what these things are. So brown pelican. Then American white pelican, AWPE is their code. I guarantee you, when you have a white pelican on your survey, you're going to try and enter it into the database as a white pelican and say, why isn't this working? Why isn't this coming up? Remember, American white pelican is their full name. And they have these dark flight feathers. So primaries and secondaries are black when the rest of the bird is white. So when they are foraging on the water or roosting, you're just going to see white. But when they're flying, you'll see this big flash of black. And these birds are never going to be flying from above and diving and crashing into the water. Their foraging strategy is to, as a group, swim along the surface, herding fish and then scooping them up. So very different foraging strategies. The brown pelican has to be smaller to be able to handle the diving activities that it does compared to these white pelicans. All right, and then related to the pelicans are the cormorants. We can tell they're related by the way their feet structure. They have the same foot structure, those 4 toes, all continuously webbed. So remember, I think a lot of things we talked about so far is looking at the feet and the legs to help you get to what family. And then some of our resources will help you from within. Once you've gotten to the family, then you're going to be able to use some of the resources to help further get to actual species. So cormorants are dark, long-necked water birds with those 4 webbed toes. We have 3 species that are common in the California coastal waters. The Brandt's cormorant, double-crested, and pelagic. We'll go through each of those. So the double-crested cormorant is more often associated with lagoons, bays, estuaries. They definitely can. There are a couple birds that breed on the Farallones, but in general, outer coast regions, the dominant species are not, this is not going to be the dominant species. So Crissyfield Beach, Tomales beaches, near Bodega, you'll see these double-crested cormorants. They're the largest of the 3, and they have a prominent jog in the neck, the actual alignment of the neck while they fly. And they have yellow in the bill. So not all of these pictures shows it very, very well, but yellow in the bill and in the gular pouch area and flesh around the face. The younger birds can be lighter in color. They can, especially on the chest, have a lighter wash. They can be even lighter than these. But the adults will be black. And their 4-letter code is DCCO. They are resident here year-round. Our Brandt's cormorant, this has an unusual 4-letter code, BRAC. It's one of those outlier 4-letter codes. So these birds are also resident. They are found in the San Francisco Bay as well as the outer coast. They breed on offshore islands along California, Año Nuevo Island, Alcatraz, Southeast Farallon Island, the rocks off the Sonoma and Mendocino coasts. So Brandt's cormorants in the breeding plumage get this outrageous turquoise gular pouch and a slightly contrasting blue eye. Year round, they have this tawny, I call it tawny, it's tan, whatever you want to call it, tawny patch of feathers just on their chin, like behind the bill. That is useful year round. Look for it. If it has that, you know what species it is. It's Brandt's cormorant. Pelagic cormorants have a very useful field mark sometimes if they're breeding and if they haven't molted it. If they have a white patch on each side of the rump, you know it's a pelagic cormorant. It might be a pelagic cormorant that's not in breeding plumage, so don't count it. You know, it's helpful if it's there. So this is the smallest of our 3 cormorants. And they have a much more slender bill, head, and neck. So I'm going to go back a slide for a second. So the Brandt's cormorant is more tapered, a bit more sturdy. It's long, tapered, and sturdy. The double-crested cormorant is heftier and a little bit shorter in comparison to the head, and yellow. So pelagic cormorant being very delicate, little bill, kind of a pencil bill. Sometimes when it's flying, you can't even see the bill. So if it's that slight, it is a pelagic. So again, from Rich Stallcup's books, cormorants in flight. So the double-crested has a kink in the neck here and a blocky head. So this is an actual size comparison of the 3. So just thick, deep wings, blocky head, zig in the, and often this yellow bill will stand out. Brandt's cormorant is more slender. This tawny patch of feathers right here should stand out if you're looking for it. And then the pelagic is the smallest of the 3, just a really skinny, the head doesn't really stand out. It's just it's just a streamline. And if you have it in breeding plumage, the white patch, the white flank patches will be right there. So even in flight, you should be able to identify these. There are some tricks to them in the field in terms of where they like to hang out. The cormorants, the pelagics like to hang on the steepest cliffs. I'll show you another picture. This little tuft on the top of the pelagic is good for them. That is helpful. And the little kind of red patch of skin around their face. The double-crested cormorant here tends to like, they might just nest on piers, on docks, on the top of rocks. The Brandt's cormorants like to nest on the flat tops of little offshore rocks. Like if you go to Bodega Head, which we will, the top of the rocks, the flat areas is where the Brandt's cormorants like to nest. And then the cliff faces is where the pelagics like to nest. So these are all pelagic cormorants. Okay, we're just going to have a few more small groups of birds here, and then we're going to wrap up for tonight. So the wading birds, we have a number of species of wading birds that could be seen. So these are the herons and egrets, and they have very long necks, straight dagger-like bills, and they're mostly found on estuaries and lagoons. However, I've certainly seen great blue herons just walking down big sandy beaches like they own the place, because they do. I guess I'll go back a slide. So great blue herons, great egrets, closer to in size to the great blue heron. Snowy egrets, look for those yellow feet, smaller in size than the great egrets, and then the black-crowned night herons. We have a number of geese species that we could see, most commonly the different varieties of the Canada goose, and then our estuary loving brant goose with that darker cheek and dark neck. We have our dabbling ducks, most common on some of a handful of our surveys. These are 4 to name a few. So just trying to highlight the different kind of groupings so that you can start labeling things as, I don't know what it was, but it was a dabbling duck. I don't know what it was, but it was a tube nose. And we have our diving ducks. So dabblers are ones that sit on the surface and then do a little butts up, foraging, and then pop back up. So they're never diving. These diving ducks we see along the surf zones and deeper waters. Some other species in the bays. So these are pursuit divers. You'll see them diving in the surf zone. You're trying to identify it and it disappears. It's dove down, foraging on mole crabs, comes back up. So we have 3 species of surf scoters, 3 species of scoters, and most common in our region being the surf scoter. I think we saw both males and females on Saturday. And then red-breasted merganser does like to winter along the kind of marine terrace, rocky intertidal areas along our coastline in the winter. So surf scoter, we saw both this adult female type and the adult male on the weekend. The young ones we see in the fall. By this time of year, they're starting to look more like the males and females going into the first breeding season. Black scoter is rare, but we do see them sometimes. A very different bill, a much smaller bird, no white patch on the back of their head. And white-winged scoter. Nice if you see them flying with a group of surf scoters, they will stand out with that white in the wing, in the secondaries. And the red-breasted merganser, these will sit on the rocks in marine terrace areas, a male and female, looking notably different. And our diurnal raptors and the turkey vulture. So turkey vulture is not exactly a raptor, but the most common birds of prey that we see along the coast are the red-tailed hawk. Peregrine falcon is actually quite common along our survey sites. And the osprey and the northern harrier. And turkey vultures, if you have a dead whale wash up on your beach, which you'll be surprised at how often that actually happens, you will see about half the county's turkey vultures come out for that kind of event. So we'll practice identification of all of these birds as we see them in the field over the next weeks. But just know these are some of the most common. And another option, the coots in our estuary beaches also have lobed toes, similar to the grebes. They are a chicken-like marsh bird that has moved into the water and use those toes to kind of swim around. And I believe our last big group of birds here are alcids. I think some of you heard us use that term over the weekend. These are some of our most numerous seabirds in this area. Common murre being the most common. That's the most common species that we see washing up dead on our beaches. They nest on the Farallon Islands. All of these species here are resident to this region, so we have them year round. There are a few others that can migrate in from the north, but these 6 species are they breed either on the mainland or on the islands offshore. So starting with the tufted puffin, these birds nest on the Farallon Islands. We will see them, sometimes we'll do a boat trip with Peter Pyle and we'll just go birding and we'll make that available to Beach Watch volunteers. And we see these birds offshore. They're pretty spectacular and always get a lot of kind of squeals out of myself as well as anyone else who sees them. When they are younger or in their non-breeding, they have a darker face and a smaller bill, but you will notice that it's a very notable bill. So always, when you have a big orange bill, look at the puffins, and we'll also look at rhinoceros auklet. A smaller bill, but also orange. These are tough birds. I've worked with them a lot on the Año Nuevo Island and in Alaska. They are like solid footballs and they are very feisty birds. They are most closely related to puffins, all in this alcid family. But they have these dark underwings and white bellies, whitish bellies. We certainly do see these dead on our beaches in the winter, so keep an eye out. They do not always have the rhinoceros style horn that they get their name from. They lose that in the winter, even by the end of the breeding season, due to all of their burrowing and things that they do. So we'll keep an eye out for them on our beaches in the winter. They're most common washing up in the winter. Common murres, these are our biggest, we get the most dead of this species. They have, we don't see them very often live on our surveys. They have a really cool strategy of, they have 1 egg on exposed ground on the Farallon Islands, and after the chick has hatched and grown a little bit, they encourage the chick to jump off the island with no main flight feathers. This little chick jumps to its father down in the water below, and then the 2 of them basically like sail towards the mainland, diving. The adult will be diving to feed its chick. So the male takes care of the chick after fledging for a couple of months, and they do a lot of calling back and forth to each other. So we will see adult size birds and we will see chick size birds for this species basically only. All other birds, when they leave their nest, are adult sized, and we just have to look at little indications in the plumage as to what their age is. But this one will actually be smaller. They'll have smaller bills. They might not have full feathers. They might be downy. So this is one you'll have to get used to in the fall. We'll be seeing chick versions and adult versions of the same thing. In the breeding season, the adults have fully dark heads. And in the winter, they have these dark eye line, but kind of white, more white in the throat and the sides of the head. So we see a lot of variations in these birds through the year. Cassin's auklet is quite rare. We have had a number of die-offs of this species. So we'll see some years we'll see only a couple dead of this species in the entire year for all of our survey sites. And then we'll have a mortality event, and we've had up to 180 dead on a single survey. So not all beaches will get numbers like that. Some beaches won't get any at all. But this is a smaller alcid. Again, always with that counter shading, the dark above, the light below. They have a white eyelid that looks like a little white comma above the eye. They have a pale bluish gray spot on the lower mandible. And they have these cool little gray legs with a black line up the back, kind of like a black seam up stockings. But the legs are kind of like a bluish gray color. And these are the smallest, the smaller alcids. They're really just kind of hand size. I think they're always trying to think of their wing cord. They're quite small. And our marbled murrelet, which is an endangered species. They are year round. They're very uncommon. However, we've certainly found a handful of them over the years, dead ones on beaches. This is a non-breeding bird. A breeding bird looks more brown, kind of like bark, because they are nesting in the redwoods. So marbled murrelet, we'll talk a little bit more about them as being a species that we look closely for in times when we are doing specimen collections. And our ancient murrelet, which is mostly here in the winter, uncommon. I believe they did nest on the Farallones a couple of years ago. And they're really notable with this pale tip to the bill. So keep an eye out that we do see them now and again, but again, another small alcid. And that's it for bird families 1. I know that is a lot of information, but remember, this is a resource for you. And we have a lot of other resources that we provide. So just do one pass, another pass, flip through this slideshow on the portal again. We're gonna go over bird families 2 next week. But at this point, you know, try and flip through your cheat sheets. So the cheat sheets you have so far for birds are the bird families cheat sheet. I really recommend tomorrow you look at that, flip through it, flip through your field guides. Saturday, we'll talk more about that a little bit later, but we'll be in the field and we're going to start practicing bird ID even more, both live birds, and then we're going to do some dead book activities. And then next week, believe it's on Tuesday, we're going to go through bird families 2. We'll go through that lecture. And then the following Saturday, we'll do some more birding. And no, we won't. We'll be at Cal Academy. Then at Cal Academy, we will have all of these dead birds out on the tables in front of us, and we can go through and check them out, specimens from Cal Academy. So that will be just, you know, just multiple passes on the same material and slowly absorbing. And even if you're an experienced birder, you'll be adding levels of knowledge that you've never had before. So that's my hope. All right,
Can I ask 2 questions?
Yep.
Well, one thing I just want to say is to all those new birders, all those people that haven't taken classes in birds or been out on boats where they've studied don't be overwhelmed. Be overwhelmed because that's what you're feeling right now, and I appreciate that. But it is overwhelming, and these things will come to you. So just keep absorbing it and keep knowing you don't know, you'll get it. And the overwhelming feeling is real, but it's not something you can't get over with just some interest and some experience that we will hopefully be providing you. And not all these birds that Kirsten just went through are on every beach. So there
Not
will
even
be,
close.
you're not going to see all these birds on one day. So just know you're going to just know one bird, and then the next time you'll know another bird. That's to all the beginners, because I know how this can just be like, oh my God, what did I get myself into?
Yeah, what I always say, I second all of that. When we go out in the field, try and get really comfortable with one new bird species. Just one. Keep it simple. Like by the time you're done with beach watch training, you feel really solid on a handful, yeah, on kind of our most common 10 birds, and then we go out, we mentor you in the fields, and each of those surveys you get a couple more between you and your partner. Just breathe through it. We will get you there. I've been out on surveys with outstanding birders, and I say on beach watch surveys, and I say, where did you learn your birds? They said beach watch. I started off with a very basic knowledge, and then by the time you're through a year on your beach, it's night and day compared to where you're
Yeah.
at starting. So we're here to help work through it with you, but I hope you at least know where some new resources are. You're going to be able to see that presentation again on the portal highlighting our most common species. So I think we should
Okay.
break.
Yeah, I think so too. And then Kathy
Oh.
says, well, on your break, can
Break
folks
through.
rustle up their human activities forms, the non-boating and the boating forms? So you have them to help along with the next presentation.
We
Yeah.
have one question, Kirsten, in the chat, if you could answer it before we go on a break. I thought it was a pretty good question. It's about northern fulmars and why there's so many on the beaches. You had mentioned that in the slide
Yeah,
presentation.
sure. I'm not seeing the chat right this second, but what we see when we have mortality events for northern fulmars, it's in like November, December. And when we look at the ages of all of these birds, they are almost all hatchier birds. So they nest up in Alaska. They might arrive here when we have beautiful ocean conditions with lots of food, but they came from a place that has a different oceanographic cycle going on up there. And so they may come down and they get here, they've just done a big migration, and they're all these baby birds that didn't learn how to feed themselves, and they don't make it. Even though we have great resources in that year here, it was too little too late. So it's usually young of the year for the northern fulmars.
And
And
I,
Mhm.
sorry, Kirsten, I know. But the other thing is that this is the most southern area that they go. And so we kind of get the tail end of these younger birds that are, sorry, Kirsten.
No.
That has always helped me understand how the migration works, because we're at the very tip. So it might be a very great breeding time up where they bred, and they're all kind of going and looking for food, and they end up down here. That's why they're always the young of the year, mostly.
Yeah.
This is Nancy. I had a question too, similar to that. Is the common murre, even though the name has common in it, it actually for a while was having a really hard time with its population. So why is that the most common bird we'll see on the beach? Is there any research about that?
So common murres, they were hunted for they collected their eggs on the Farallones during kind of gold rush time. So they were hit really hard by egg collection locally, and their population was really decimated by that. The they have absolutely come back. Their population on the Farallon Islands, I just saw a graph the other day. It just keeps increasing out there. They're the most common dead species on Beach Watch surveys because they have gotten so numerous. We have such a massive colony on the Farallon Islands. And in the winter, like we said, they float towards the mainland with their chicks, and then they forage along the near shore waters and in the bay. So they're close to shore. If they happen to die, they wash up on the beach. So where Cassins auklets, they nest on offshore rocks and then they go farther offshore. So if they die, they're even farther away. So we rarely see them washing up on surveys. So there's always a bit of a oceanography piece. Will something, if it dies, end up on the beach? So some species will be more likely to show up than others. So our common murres, when we see them in big numbers dead on the beach, it's not necessarily a bad thing for their population. We have a lot of them here. And so sometimes when their breeding season is great, we see more dead on the beach, and it just means that they're common. So we always are careful about the messaging of like, when we have a big mortality event, is this a bad thing? Not necessarily. It could be that they had a great year and there's just more birds in the system.
Okay,
So
thanks.
I think we should really go for a break.
Yeah.
And then we will come back and get on track. But thank you all for having great questions and sticking with us. And it's yeah, thank you.
Come back at 7:30. How's that sound?
Great.
Okay, 7:30. See you then.
So Drew,
Hello.
hello. So we're a little bit long so far. So
Yes.
I think
Here-
for the next presentation, let's hold the practical.
Yep. Is Kathy
And
here? Yeah. Okay.
and if we need to do a very shortened version of the dead
Yeah.
thing, it can be as short as needed.
Okay.
Okay.
Kirsten, one question I have for you.
Yeah.
I put it in the chat for you,
Let me-
private. You might want to read it and then tell me what you think.
Um, not in the live or dead presentations?
No,
Really?
no, we did not go over why we do it and how we do it. And so I think you need to touch on that. I didn't do it in the dead I just mentioned casually that we would be going over the codes and
Hmm.
that they're in the code sheet, but why we come up with that way of doing it.
Okay.
You may have talked to your group about it on Saturday, but
I did, yeah.
but I didn't.
We should definitely add it to the dead year talk because that's the first time we
Yeah.
ever talked about. So let's make a note of that.
Yeah, but I do think we need to address it with the group because it's sort of like, what? How come there's a 4-letter code?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I might have glanced on it, but I figured we were going to be doing it during birds. So
Yeah, well, I kind of talked through it, but it didn't give
I think it
that.
needs a framework around it.
Okay, we'll do.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Good job.
Whew. Feel like I need a like marathon water breaks, you know?
Hmm. Go do it.
No, it's okay. I feel like in the middle of that presentation, I need that. Drew, can you drive for Kathy on this?
Yeah, I'm planning on it.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I think I could get through the introduction to the dead book in 5-10 minutes if needed.
Okay.
So coming back at 7:30. Kathy
Um,
will need at least 45 minutes.
Yeah. So 7:30 to 8:15,
Mm-hmm.
and
And then-
about 8 o'clock, I'll give her a heads up of what her timing is.
Okay. But cutting out the practical slides, that cuts out a third of the slides total. And we'll do that next Thursday.
We'll just tell her.
Okay, great. All right. Did my my audio sound okay without my headset?
Yeah, you sounded fine. I don't know what a couple of people said they were cutting it, you were cutting out, but then I never heard you cut out, so.
Oh,
Yeah, I think it was on our end. There were several of us and we turned our videos off, so we could, once we did that, it stopped.
okay. Yeah, I have my internet here is like 100. So it probably wasn't on my end.
Yeah, it was only a few of us. There was like 3 of us, including me.
And me. So I'll greet everybody and then I'm gonna turn my video off too because I just wanna be assured of bandwidth.
And Kathy, we're not gonna do the practicals.
I heard that, yes,
okay,
sorry,
just
I
not
was
making sure.
muted, yeah, thanks.
Yes, I think if we switch gears at 8, at least at 8:15, then we can do at least 10 minutes on the dead book and then switch to next. What's up next?
Steps. What's up, Doc?
What's up, Doc? Okay. All right, I'll be quiet now.
No, you can.
Oh, wait, did you want me to do the 4-letter code thing?
I do.
Okay.
Can you do that before Kathy launches?
Yep.
Okay.
Oh, Drew, I love that photo.
I know. I'll never top it.
You have topped it with many photos.
Oh, thank you.
I used to use that one all the time.
Yeah, I
Good one.
know. It's like, I took it.
I always gave you credit for it.
It was lucky. It was a lucky point and shoot.
Drew's gotten lucky taking pictures of completely black common MERS in flight and
It's so
Mother-
fun. Like
Food
something
photo.
rare will go by, and then Kirsten's like, take it, get it, get it, get it. And I'm like, oh, I think I got it. And then we get back and we're like, oh my God, it's the Hawaiian petrol. It's when I get them, I get them.
I may seem very even mannered, but when something exciting goes by, I get loud and start speaking in words that aren't words. All right. Oh, we're almost at 7:30. I'm jumping the gun. Everybody doing okay? Did you learn something new? Are you still breathing?
Yeah, I was questioning about, I see a lot of scalps around, Aquatic Park and the bay.
Yeah.
And also I was wondering about canvasbacks. Do you see those very often? I have not seen one in a long time.
Yeah, so those are more interior estuaries. We probably do see some on our like Sea Drift Bolinas Lagoon survey, we absolutely do, but most of our surveys are outer coast, and so that the slant on the presentation is definitely more outer coast. But yes, SCOP absolutely are on some of our surveys, a couple of them. So we'll get you keyed up with, like, we can look up a species list for your site from the database and help you really narrow down to your site, and then practicing with your alternate team and mentors on your first 3 or so surveys. We will get you comfortable and dialed in. Drew asked me to do a little overview on the 4-letter codes in case everyone didn't get that information. So 4-letter codes are a standard in research for birds as well as mammals. And that typically, if it is a two parts to the name, so Western gull, you take the first 2 letters of the first word and first 2 letters of the second word, and you have your 4-letter code. So Western gull would be WEGU or WEGU. You start, after you get really comfortable with your codes, you will start using them commonly. So anyone know what a bloy would be?
Black oyster catcher.
Nice. Yep. So you will start, you kind of merge over into 4-letter code speak sometimes. So there are some birds that their 4-letter code would, that sometimes multiple species in North America would have the same 4-letter code if they're in code form. Like bronzed cowbird would have a conflict with Brandt's cormorant. So therefore, both of them get a different 4-letter code. Neither of them gets BRC. It would, so ours is BRAC for, so there is a full species code list on the portal, and you can print that if you want, but I will just tell you you can, it's a lot of papers, and you will get good on your 20 species really quickly. And then you can look up any outlier ones after. Okay, so any other questions? We're going to switch over to the human use data sheet. Kathy's going to present next. Know that you can reach out to me anytime about ID questions. If you go out on your survey and you see something weird, or you took a photo last year, email me. I'm happy to talk through it. And then once you get to know Peter Pyle, he will be a resource as well. Other Beachwatch staff, we're all here. But just putting that out there, you can always reach out. All
Okay,
right. Yeah, I think we're gonna hand it over to you, Kathy.
All right, thanks, Kirsten. So I'm going to wave and say hello. Then, because of my limited bandwidth, I'm going to shut off my video, and Drew will be driving the presentation on human activities forms. So welcome aboard. If you have your human activities forms with you, this is a good time to pull them out and follow along. Okay, I see the slideshow not in slideshow form, and it is now. Thank you. Okay. So human activities are documented along with wildlife during the live survey, but we get our own forms. We get a 2-page form with both land-based activities, water-based activities, and boat-based activities. Next slide. And we do this because Greater Farallones Association is a member of a network of organizations who help what is called MPA Watch. And an MPA is a marine protected area. These were sensitive areas that are protected by the Marine Life Protection Act, passed by the state of California in 1999. And not only was the network of these special areas created, but baked into that act was required monitoring to assess how these regulations are being, or if they're being effective and in what ways. Next slide. So as I said before, Greater Farallones Association is a member organization of MPA Watch. Our Beach Watch data is included in the MPA Watch online database. And again, we provide data on public compliance of these state regulations mandated by the Marine Life Protection Act. And we also, our data helps inform land managers where these activities shift to after the MPAs are established, where some of these other take activities, especially fishing and collecting, where they shift, where they go elsewhere along the coast. We will cover MPAs a lot more in depth in the next coming presentations. But this lovely northern coast map from Half Moon Bay in the south up to Fort Ross in the north shows in black or in red and green dots are Beach Watch beaches. And then interestingly, look carefully on the map and you'll see colored boundaries, different shapes, and those represent the different marine protected areas near, and some of them are near or are nested within our coastal Beach Watch sites. So next slide, please. So we will always tell you if your site is within an MPA and what regulations are enforced within that MPA. There's many different types of NPAs and they vary in level of protection, the constancy of protection, scale of protection, what types of species are being conserved or emphasized. So we'll give you all that information so that you can keep in mind what activities are allowable within your beach survey area. And just a reminder, this survey zone is slightly different from our birds survey zone, and it is also slightly different than our marine mammals survey zone. So our human activities survey zone, if you look at our little graphic at the bottom, you see the yellow rectangle is our beach. So the human activities survey zone includes the width of the beach, and then offshore up to 500 meters or 1/3 of a mile. Note that you don't look inland to document human activities. So you're just looking at the beach and up to 1/3 of a mile offshore. And we can help you when we get together on Saturday. We can look at how to estimate distance and just sort of a general tip. You can see approximately 3 to 4 miles from your observation elevation out to the horizon. And so you only need to document human activities just 1/3 of a mile offshore, so pretty close to the beach. If you can't read the names and numbers off of a fishing boat with your binoculars, it is out of zone, another handy tip. And also look at your survey map and to estimate any sort of offshore rocks and landmarks to help you calibrate your count zone. Usually offshore rocks and these landmarks have very easily researchable, easily distinguished landmark distances, and then you can use that to help you figure out the rest of your count zone. So use those landmarks to help you figure out, to calibrate your count zone. We can help you do that on Saturday. Next slide. These are what the forms look like. Form or page 3 is non-boating activities. page 4 is boating activities. Looking at the left, we have land-based activities, everything from just people on the beach, person on beach, and then specific activities that people are doing. So that could be anything from wildlife watching, and we would call a wildlife watcher someone with binoculars or a spotting scope actively looking at wildlife, down to people in trucks or cars, people with dogs. And we do like to know, are the dogs off leash or are they on leash? That does make a big difference in, especially with park or beach regulations about dogs on beaches. So we like to know that. Going down the list, a recently added human activity is drone flying. Then into some of the overhead things, kite flying, hang gliding, paragliding. And then down at the bottom of land-based activities are sort of what we call the take activities, the different types of fishing or other collection of biota. You could be clamming or maybe collecting seaweed. The second half, or the last third of the form, is water-based activities. So that's everything above, if you're in the water above your knee, you are having a land-based activity. So everything from surfing and swimming down to consumptive activities like diving, spear fishing, and abalone fishing. So both of these activities, or both of these forms, have important information at the very bottom. We're asking for observations on beach closures or large gatherings or enforcement activities. Did you see a ranger or a park official out speaking with someone or performing an enforcement activity? Large gatherings would be maybe a class, maybe a wedding, maybe a camping trip. I just saw in the chat, please elaborate on aquaculture. And so that would probably be like either seaweed farming or sort of an oyster or mussel farming. That would be more of a commercial venture. And we will tell you in your beach description if you have that sort of activity to expect on your beach. On the boating activities on the right, we're looking at not the number of people in the boats, you just are counting the boats. And so we have fishing, recreational fishing boats at the top, commercial fishing boats in the middle, and all other boats. If you're not fishing, you're just out for a kayak trip, or you're having a jet ski, or you're on a dive boat or whale watching boat, we want to know about that, and you would include that in your all other boats section. And again, at the bottom, some interesting and important information. Did you report any violations? Did you see anything that was going on that would be a violation of an MPA regulation or a park regulation? And if so, how did you report it? Did you call the Beach Watch phone number? Did you call CalTip, which is an anti-poaching anonymous tip line? And we can talk about that in depth later. And what were any wildlife disturbances? Can you describe them? Was there an off-leash dog chasing snowy plovers? Was there someone trying to take a selfie with a harbor seal? It happens. And having those kinds of comments written down is important for us to have, especially with regards to our partners, our land managers, and we like to inform them of what's going on with regards to sanctuary or park violations. Okay, let's get into it a little bit further, a little more in depth. So you count your human activities during your live survey. And if you think back to Saturday, how busy Crissy Field or Crissy Beach was, there was the kayak group, there were dogs off leash, dogs on leash, there was, I think, someone kayaking, there was some swimmers, there was people in the water. And so it's really good to think about delineation of labor and maybe have your someone looking at birds, someone looking at marine mammals, and someone counting people. And you can change that up and change it up every survey and have a different person do human activities each time so that we all get good at gulls and human activity counting. We progress together. You count your people as you pass the activity. So don't look way down the beach with your binoculars to try to figure out how many people are in the wedding party. So try to count as you pass the activity, and don't count what's happening behind you unless those people pass you and enter your count zone. If your person's activity changes, like say they started out watching wildlife and then they put away their scope and they started just walking around on the beach, you don't have to change their activity. You can keep them as coded as wildlife watcher. Once you complete your live and human activity survey, don't add any new observations. You're going to then switch gears and do your dead survey. Also, don't assume what activity is the person is going to do next. There's a couple of exceptions. If you see someone in a wetsuit with tanks walking down to the beach and they have a dive flag with them, it's pretty evident that they're going to go scuba diving. If someone is all decked out with their wetsuit and carrying their surfboard down to the beach, you can pretty much assume that they're gonna go surfing. But watch what the people are doing. Watch carefully before you code them. And don't forget, remember that your human activity zone ends at the first vegetation landward. So if you're on a beach, you don't have to count the people having a picnic in the dunes that are off your beach area. You don't have to count the people that are above you on the bluff doing some whale watching. So those are just some hints for general human activities form. So our data section, as I was saying before, has 3 sections. Our land-based activity, that's on the beach. It's in the air. So that's kite flying and drone flying, and up to your knees in the water. So if you're just walking through the surf or maybe doing some tide pooling, that would be a land-based activity. If you're water-based, if you're above your knees or in the water all the way, that's a water-based activity. Those are both on page 3. And page 4 is anything, if you're in a vessel or on a vessel, that's on the boating form. Next slide. So we like to refer to consumptive activities as take activities. This is when you're removing a resource, mostly a biological resource, from the area. And we do distinguish between those consumptive activities versus non-consumptive. So here we have examples of 3 different types of take activities. Bottom left is a shore-based activity. You have someone standing on the beach with a fishing pole. We would call that shore-based hook and line. In the middle, we have a kayaker, and he looks like he has a crab trap. And on the right is a commercial vessel taking people out for maybe halibut or salmon fishing. And again, those are 3 different examples of take activities. Next slide. We also document where the activity is occurring, and we have 2 general types. We have rocky substrate or sandy substrate. So all tide pooling is going to happen in a rocky substrate. That's an example on the left. And so that's why on your form, you'll have tide pooling crossed out under the sandy column, because it can really only happen, tide pooling can really only happen in the rocky substrate zone. And there we have an example on the right of just people on the beach sitting or walking, and that is a representation of sandy substrate. And you may have both on your on your survey. Your survey zone may cover both types of substrate. Next slide. So our area, we usually look at 3 different types of commercial boats. We have trollers on the left, old time crab or salmon boats in the middle. And then we have the commercial passenger fishing boats. These are tour boats that take groups of anglers out for the day. It's usually a lot of lines, a lot of people at the back. The commercial trollers will have those long arms that go up and down. Usually there's nets coming out of them. Sometimes you might have different equipment coming off the back. And we have on our portal some pictures of different type of recreational human use activities, just to give you some examples. So you can check that out on our portal to learn a little bit about the different types of boats that come into our survey zone. Next slide. We also are curious if the fishing activity, especially on boats, is active or inactive. So we'll document when a fishing boat is actively fishing. And so on the left is an example of that. There's a guy pulling up a big crab trap. So he's setting gear, dragging gear, recovering gear. Sometimes they'll stay in one place while they're doing that. Or are they transiting? If they've pulled up their gear and they're heading home, or they haven't started fishing yet and they're just entering your survey zone. So if you can, watch the boat for a few minutes with your binoculars to get an idea of where they're at in their fishing activity. Have they started? Are they actively fishing, or are they inactive? Next slide. So let's take a look at the form in depth. Next slide. Right, so we knew that land-based activities are on the beach, up to your knees, in the air, above the beach, or above the beach. This is a handy reminder at the very top of the form. You have a time start and a time stop box. So we like to know when you do your live survey. So when you start, you put your military time, and then don't forget when you end to put your time stop in there. And that includes when you've stopped watching wildlife as well. So all live survey, when you're done with that, you make sure to put your time stop in. That's one thing that they have on the non-boating and the boating forms that aren't on the other forms. So it's just a good reminder to keep track of your time. Next slide. So beach watch surveyors are wildlife watchers. So you do include yourself on the tally. And if you spend the majority of your time on one substrate over the other, then put yourself in the correct substrate. You can see rocky tallies and rocky count on the left, and sandy tally and sandy count on the right. So this survey would have 2 wildlife watcher surveyors, and they are spending their time on a sandy substrate. There could be a lot more wildlife watchers out there. If you've got a good birdie beach, you might have lots of other wildlife watchers with you, but you count yourself as a wildlife watcher. Next slide. And down here at the bottom on the left are your take activities. And other hand collection of biota, that would mean seaweed collections or mussel collections, and even things that perhaps are violations, like collecting sea stars, collecting nudibranchs, that kind of thing. You would make sure to document those. Okay, next slide. Water-based activities, again, everything from bathing to consumptive diving. So it also has a box for non-consumptive diving. So if you see someone going in with tanks and a wetsuit and a flag, and you don't see trap equipment or nets or a spearfish or a spear, then you don't have to count that as a you have no evidence to tell you that that's a consumptive diving activity. So you would code that under non-consumptive. Okay. And back to the bottom of our form, we have notable observations. So this surveyor example, they had both a beach closer and a large gathering. So they had a crew on the beach doing dune restoration. That's a large gathering. And we want to know about that. The beach was closed by 10% because of snowy plover symbolic fencing that had been set up. We want to know about that too. And they had 11 people on a geology walk. So again, another large gathering. So any other activities that don't fit well into your human activities boxes, just include them there. And we'll get into enforcement activities in the next example. Okay, next slide, please. So again, our boating based activities, what kind of boat is it? What are they doing? If you don't know what kind of boat it is, that's totally okay. We have some boxes under commercial fishing boats. We have on the right an unknown section. And we also have under all other boats, the very last line is other boat. So particularly sailboat, you would include there. Taking a photo of the boat and letting us know that that's the one you couldn't identify, that's great. We can help you. If we see the photo, we can help you ID it when you send it in to us. Okay, next slide. On page 4, the boating form, again, they have a bottom section, which is really useful. Did you report any violations, either the sanctuary itself or the MPA? You can report it to the Beach Watch phone, which is listed there and should be in your phone. And then we'd like you to make some observations or written comments below. So this comment is about a wildlife disturbance. So this is it could be an enforcement or a sanctuary violation. 2 off-leash dogs were observed nipping at northern elephant seal on the beach. They also flushed 50 sandpipers and 7 whimbrels repeatedly. So they described the disturbance, species noted, number of animals disturbed, what was the cause, time and duration. And then they also included what they did. Reported disturbance to Sanctuary Reporting Hotline, the Marine Mammal Center, which is often abbreviated to TMMC, and Point Reyes National Seashore Dispatch. And that would be your land manager. We'll give you those telephone numbers so that you can call the land manager for your particular beach if you have especially an urgent violation that needs immediate attention. So that's your bottom of data sheet number 4. So please don't forget that part when you are doing your live survey. Next slide. So we actually have, and I think we might wait and do this based on timing, but can we go one slide ahead? We actually took some photos from our Beach Watch portal that different surveyors had taken, and we have all these pictures of people doing things, and we thought it'd be fun to test yourself and see, okay, how would I code this? Where would I put it, and how many would I count them? And so I think we are running short on time. Let me just check in with Drew and Kirsten if we can do the practical tonight, and if we can't, we'll just we'll do it on another Zoom call.
I think we can do a little bit. So let's do some now and then save some for another time. I'll just
Maybe a couple of them.
yeah, maybe say 5 minutes or so. And just a reminder that your Beach Watch codes your Beach Watch codes cheat sheet, if you flip that over, it has definitions for all of the human uses on that. I mean, most of them are pretty self-explanatory, but if you ever have a question and want to get really clear, all of those definitions are there. Okay, I'm going to pass it over to the practical Kathy.
Okay, thanks. So Amber, I think it was Amber in the chat had a question, where are the docents counted? So that's a good question. If the leader of the group is got binoculars and doing a birding class, I would count them as a wildlife watcher, just like with all the other people with binoculars. But I put it in comments that there was a class going on, including a docent. If they're doing a tide pooling class, I would include them as a tide pooler. But again, I would put in comments that there was a docent on site leading a group of people in a tide pooling activity. So Kirsten and Drew, if you have additional comments on that, please speak out. Okay, so feel free to unmute yourself. So, okay, we're starting pretty easy. We have what kind of substrate? You can unmute yourself or write it in the chat. Maybe I should back up. Which would it go on, 3 or 4? Page 3 or page 4?
You can actually fill out your human use form like you were on the beach right now as a practice.
Great idea.
How about we just have somebody unmute themselves and tell us the answer?
Sounds great.
I'm getting an echo, so I'm gonna mute a few folks and just feel free to unmute yourself when you want to talk.
Person on beach, 2 people on sand.
I agree with that. How about, okay, great. Let's go on to the next one. This one always makes people laugh because they want to know, do we count the toddler in the backpack?
So 11 people, Rocky Tally, wildlife watching.
So I agree with the 11. I agree with the Rocky. I'm thinking, I think it might be more accurate to put them in the tide pooling count.
Would you count like one of those people's wearing a Fitzgerald jacket and somebody has binoculars? Would you do 2 wildlife viewers because of that?
I don't think it's necessarily wrong that wildlife observing is going on, but we do have a more correct code that says tide pooling. So I would put all 11 of them in tide pooling.
Mm-hmm.
And in this moment, this person is looking in tide pools,
Yeah.
not using binoculars, and we're counting them doing the activity as we pass them, whatever activity as we pass them. But great question.
Thank you. Next slide, please.
Love this.
I know. Perhaps not the safest activity we've seen. So we have where it's hard to tell what substrate they're on. We could make a guess that they're on a sandbar, but tell me what you think on where we should code these people.
2 hook and line fishing, Sandy.
I agree with that. Does anyone have anything different? We don't always know what is on the end of that line. There could be a little trap at the end, like a little crab trap. But I think we could safely, I think with that line going out, we may have to watch it, but I think we can, for right now, say that it's hook and line fishing. But you may just want to look at what's at the end of the line to see if it could be a little crab trap. Sometimes it's difficult to tell, and you can't ask. Okay, next question, or next picture. Tell me what you think. I think we're on a different form.
So
it-
boat,
okay.
line,
Yeah.
kayak, recreational.
Active.
Yes. So it's a fishing kayak. This kayak is recreational. It doesn't appear to be commercial. There's one person in it. They do have several lines. They are in a kayak. They are line fishing. And they seem recreational rather than commercial. So good.
Our form doesn't
active.
have kayak fishing. It only has kayak non-fishing. Or am I missing it?
So at the very top of the human activities boating form, you have something called, the very first line is fishing boats, recreational.
Okay. Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay. I see.
Uh-huh. Yep, got it.
Yep.
Great. And yep, underneath is, in the middle is kayak.
Okay.
Okay, great. Do we have time for one more?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Mm.
So what are your clues in this photograph to help you make the decision on where to place him on your form?
Abalone's in his hand and he's got a dive anchor buoy.
Yes.
And wearing a wetsuit.
Yeah, and a weight belt. Yep. So even though he is kneeling on a rock, he has definitely been in the water. Or we could deduce that he has been in the water fishing for abalone. So where would he belong, on which form?
Page 3,
Mm-hmm.
water-based activities, abalone fishing.
That's where I would put him too.
I
Yep.
would also, at this point, abalone fishing is closed and it probably will be closed for a long, long time. I would call CalTIP and write a violation that somebody's out diving right now.
Yeah, good point.
We've done this practical before. We didn't have that issue, but that's something new I would add, is that this is a prohibitive activity. I wouldn't approach him. I wouldn't say, hey, dude, what are you doing? I would just call CalTIP and write noted on your form that you witnessed this potentially violation.
Thank you for
Yeah,
that, Drew. It's really important to remind ourselves that we are not an enforcement group of volunteers. We are to observe and document only. So interacting with people, especially those who are doing something egregiously in violation of sanctuary or state fishing regulations, that we do not recommend doing that. We do not want you to do that. All right.
So just in closing on this slide, and I think on the practical for the moment, this is one of the 2 activities that you would count even if you didn't see this person walking out of the water. So the scuba diving, the surfing, and this type of, you're suited up with weight belt on, you're not, even if this activity happened just before you saw it, you could still call this. Most other activities, you're going to have to say exactly what they're doing the moment you see them. All right. Thank you, Kathy. Anything you want to say in closing on that?
No, I think that the people who are on Ocean Beach and Chrissy Beach, you're going to be really becoming a quick expert on human activities and all the variety of human activities on our beaches. In some ways, it's super exciting. It's super exciting to see so many people recreating on our beaches, and it's just a nice thing to see. Some part of me wants the beach all to myself in my own small petty way, me and my wildlife. But it's just, especially after the pandemic, I feel like people are out on our beaches in much larger numbers and recreating in all kinds of great ways.
Sometimes impactful ways, but this information is captured by the data that you collect, and it's used by land managers. So it's really useful. So we will be practicing this on Saturday. We're going to be practicing live dead and human uses on Stinson Beach. We'll get to that in a couple of minutes, but we're going to go over one last piece before we're going to talk about our dead books and a little orientation to our dead books before Saturday, when we're going to have some exercises that we do. So take a deep breath. We're changing gears. Thank you, Kathy, for that great overview of, oh, now I need to share this one moment. My brain is starting to quiet down for the evening and not hitting the right buttons. Okay, so you have all received your dead book. So this is a really cool resource. It has some limitations, and we will do our best to show you kind of the best ways in which this book should be used. This book was published quite a long time ago. I think the earliest versions were in the 80s. The beached marine birds and mammals of the North Coast, the North American West Coast, and there's actually more things in there than that. It has been revised to include sea turtles and sharks as well. So this is what we affectionately call the Dead Book. And it has really fantastic reference plates of anatomically correct life-size diagrams of bird parts, and also dichotomous keys to help identify the animals to species. So in the middle of the book, you can open it up and look at life-size comparisons of bird bills. And these are all that. This is the Alcids page. So many different, this doesn't even have the common murre. So this is just some of our Alcids. Some of these birds are not even in our range, but most of them are. We also have bird feet. So these are life-size drawings of our different bird feet. And as I've mentioned so many times, the shape of the bird foot can really help you get to the bird family. And that's where you want to be in moving towards getting to individual species. So on the left page here, this is the 4 toes that are webbed between each of the toes. This will be our cormorants, our pelicans, our boobies. Then up above that, you'll see 3 toes that are webbed. And this is often The alcids can be this way. The tube noses will have 3 toes webbed. If there's a little toe hanging, a 4th toe hanging off the back but not webbed, that could be our gulls. So these feet are really helpful. Number 5 on the right-hand side, these are our lobed grebe toes. So super cool reference. And then we have our bird sternums. These are life size and very helpful. I'm going to use my cursor here to show you this part of the sternum is the part that is sticking straight out. So the sternum is the breastplate. Just this shaded part here is the part that is sticking straight out like a keel. It is a keel. And then this part is more going across the chest. So just so you can like visually understand what you're looking at. This big one here is the common loon, and then these smaller ones, we have fulmars, sooty, shearwater. And the size of the keel doesn't necessarily, like a really large keel doesn't mean it's a really large bird. So some of the birds with the largest keels are the birds that are swimming with their wings underwater. They need more surface area for muscle attachment to that sternum. So you'll get a really good sense. You'll start to be able to identify things just from their sternums. All right, we're going to go through an example and then we'll practice more. We'll practice more on Saturday. So we have a dead bird. We have our photo scale here. This bird is all, we're looking at the dorsal view, the top view of this bird. And I'm going to try and figure out what this is. First thing I want to do is look at the general characteristics of the bird to try and figure out what bird family this is before really digging into the dead book. So you can use your bird family cheat sheet, which describes the general characteristics of each of the bird families. So now we're going to take a look at this bird thinking about this. Well, I see here's the body of the bird, and the bird's legs are attaching at the absolute back of the body. And these, if I was there in person, I'd really be able to tell the tarsus here is just paper thin. It is laterally compressed. And we have big lobed toes. Does anybody remember what bird family this would be? We're not even getting the species, but just what bird family? Can use the chat.
Grebe.
Woohoo! Love it. Yes, so we have a grebe.
Because of the delicate neck, that's how I,
Delicate neck, wonderful, delicate bill, all of this. Awesome. Okay, so now that we've decided it's a grebe, we're gonna look in the back of the dead book to find what page the key to grebes is on. And it's on page 29 and 30. So the first question, this is going to be a little example of how to use this dichotomous key in a useful way. So the key to grebes, it's like a choose your own adventure kind of thing. So we read the first one. So number 1, it says the wing chord is less than 180 millimeters. It could be in the range of 181 to 215. The bill is longer than the head, or the bill is greater than 44 millimeters, and the tarsus is greater than 60 millimeters. So we'll just let that stand. We're going to read the second one, the next one that says 1. So we have to consider between these two options. So we'll read the second number 1. Wing chord is less than 155 millimeters. bill is shorter than the head, or bill is less than 30 millimeters and tarsus is less than 45. Okay, so now let's consider this bird that we have. The wing chord is 205 millimeters and the bill is 66 millimeters. So of these first two options, the two options of number one, do we all agree that our bird fits the first option? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes. So the wing chord, so this first question is saying, are we dealing with the big grebes? Or are we dealing with the little grebes? And the answer is we're dealing with the big grebes. So down in the bottom right-hand corner, it tells you, okay, if this is your option, we're gonna go to number 2. So this is the choose your own adventure part. So if it had been a little grebe, we'd be going to number 5. So number 2. Our next question, are the wings with white on inner primaries and outer secondaries? Is the bill length greater than 58 millimeters with scales on bottom of the tarsus smooth with feet olive to yellow? So let's see, number 2. So yes, there was white on the inner and outer primaries, the inner primaries and the outer secondaries, and the bill length works for this. So now we're going to go to number 3. So number 3 says, is the bill yellow to orange throughout and the black of the cap not extending to the lores? The lores are the eyes. The dark of the back is pale in color. Or is the bill yellowish green with blackish or darker culmen? Culmen is the bill. Is the black of the cap extending below the eye to the lores? And the back of the bird is quite dark. So here we're looking at the bird. Is this bill yellow to orange throughout? Or is the bill yellowish green with blackish parts?
It's 3.
So based on the color of the bill and that the eye is in the dark, we have our species. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes. So we had the main difference here was the color of the bill. Is it yellow to orange, like totally yellow to orange? Or is it yellowish green with some darker, yellowish green and gray? So were they yellowish green to gray with the eye in the dark? And the back color, which we're not looking at right now, is quite dark. So that means we just chose between Clark's grebe and Western grebe. We've chosen the Western grebe. So now we have, so it said Western grebe, go to number 4. So now we're going to number 4 and we can tell even more information. We can figure out what the sex is. So now we're going to look at the bill plates to look at the shape of the bill. This is like such cool stuff. I just have to say, this is always exciting. So it tells us to go to plate 2-5 and 2-6. We're going to look at both of these options. And we're going to look at the bill shape. So for both Western and Clark's grebes, the male and female have different shaped and sized bills. So it's the same for either Clark's or Western grebe, but we've decided it is a Western grebe. So is the bill relatively straight and long? Or is it more slender in comparison with a slight upturn and kind of an angular shape on the bottom of the bill? So looking at this bird, it matches beautifully with 5 with the straight bill. And you can actually take that bird's head and hold it over these bills in your book, and it'll match. It'll be the right size, it'll be the right angle when you find the right one. So we've just gone through from finding a dead bird on the beach, figuring out what family it was based on the general characteristics, and then keying out to species and sex. So we decided number 5, this is a Western grebe and it's a male. So for our coding based on our Beach Watch code sheet, we just found a WEGR and it's a male.
See the
So
correct-
that's a quick run through of one specimen. There's a lot of other useful information in the book, including pinnipeds. So the seals and sea lions, the cetaceans, so the dolphins and the whales, the sharks, the rays, and the sea turtles. So we'll leave that there for now. Maybe we'll do some other little exercises with this down the road, but we will definitely be using this on Saturday. So please bring it in the field with you on Saturday. And I think that is it. I'm going to pass it over to either Drew or Kathy to talk about Saturday.
Sure, I can do that. If you stop, shave, yep, there you go. And I'll share my screen. And can you see this?
Yes.
Hang on a second. There you go. So that was a big night. Proud of you all for hanging in there. And now just know on Saturday, March 16th, we're going to meet at Stinson Beach. That is you can use on Google the Stinson Beach admin parking lot. It's the main parking lot for Stinson Beach. The gate opens at 9 o'clock. They won't let us in until 9 o'clock. So meet there. Try not to line up on the highway to get in. Maybe pull your car over to a little more convenient spot, or even behind the Stinson Beach parking lot. There's some parking by the library back there. And then come rolling in at 9, and you will see our cars. We'll go down to the bathroom. So just drive till you see us all congregating. We'll be doing Beach Watch mock surveys on the beach. So come with your binoculars and your backpack. Be sure to bring a pencil, measuring equipment, data sheets and cheat sheets, and your field guide. Now, some of you guys are in teams of 2 already, but you're each going to do the survey. So please come, each of you come prepared to do a survey, at least a mini survey activity. And of course, reminders of water, snacks, or lunch to sustain you, because we'll be getting done around 1:30. And sunscreen, it's going to be a great day. The forecast looks like it's going to be sunny with 60 plus degrees. So bring a hat, good walking shoes, remember your sunscreen. And we'll see you at the parking lot at 9 a.m. at Stinson. If you're still looking for a carpool or need a ride, let me stop sharing my screen. Be sure and get in touch with one of us so we can put you in touch with someone else, or the contact list is on the portal. Most people have gone on the portal since we've started to see that it still works for you. We every day have been adding new information to your trainee page. So be sure and look at the portal. The roster's there too. So any questions from today's presentations or what's going to be coming up on Saturday? We all put you to sleep.
The Parkside Cafe has a lovely pastry and coffee kiosk. If you get there before 9 a.m. and you need a place to park, that's where I'm going to park.
Where is it? At the
Parkside. in Stinson Beach.
Oh, Parkside.
Yeah.
Amber has a question in the chat. Will we drive and park somewhere else to go to the lagoon after Stinson or stay parked at Stinson?
I think what we are planning is we're going to do a beach survey together. We're going to review what everyone's found. We're going to practice the dead book, and we're going to see what our timing is. And if we have at least 45 minutes or an hour, we will drive to the lagoon area to do some birding. If we run out of time, we might decide where, you know, that's an extracurricular activity, and we'll tell you where to go. Is that fair, Kirsten?
Yeah,
Our-
our plan is to do a little bit, but we don't, you know, we know we're giving you a lot of information and we want to be steadily moving through it, but not rushing. So as long as we can, you know, I will certainly be driving north after and would, you know, we'll be stopping and birding. So hopefully we'll be able to do so as a group.
Is there a fee for Stinson Beach parking lot?
Nope.
No.
And there are bathrooms there. So we'll make sure to have breaks so people can use that. And
It's fun.
Yeah.
It's a good day. And the weather's awesome. So
every day is a good day. It'll be really
Fun.
fun to be out in the field with you all and see what we find out there. It's like you never know when you do a beach watch survey, what are you gonna find today? Like, we
brown
found a
booby.
booby already. I don't know if we're gonna top that.
No.
all right, guys, it is 8:31. And so we're going to let you go. Thank you for staying with us and staying, absorbing what you can. And we understand it's past dinner time for many of you.